We have to remember that we're very, very immature in this space still, right? We're 10 years into crypto from Bitcoin's inception. We're 5 years into smart contracts. Like, we haven't given it an opportunity to mature.
Blockchain interoperability. Out with the old, in with the new. How do we facilitate communication between legacy financial systems and decentralized blockchain-based exchanges? Moderated by Kyle Chasse, Master Ventures. Vahid Toosi, EOS Sweden. Sebastian Markowski, Blockchain Valley Ventures. Ian Balina, Token Metrics. Matty Greenspan, eToro.
Okay, thank you all. My name is Kyle Chasse, Master Ventures. And just to be transparent, as I always am, this is my first panel I'm moderating. But usually panels, I feel like pretty boring. And so on this panel, I hope we all respect each other, but I also encourage, if someone says something you don't agree with, please speak out. I encourage healthy debate. I want to get rid of political correctness. I'm sick and tired of people just agreeing to things that are misinformation. I think that we're all very intelligent people on this panel here, and please don't be polite. I'll respect each other, but also don't be polite.
I disagree with that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So if you guys just introduce each other, like Ian, start with you, work your way down. Just keep it pretty brief, and then we'll move on to some topics.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. My name is Ian Balina. I'm with Token Metrics. Some of you may know me from online, from making videos on YouTube. I'm an investor, entrepreneur, and I love crypto.
Very cool. Steve Hamid out of LA. Have an incubator called Big Bamboo. I'm officially worldwide known as the Bullseye Guy because we target specific things. Current project, Moneta Pros, my 11th company, had 3 public, and I joke we're the blockchain. JD Edwards, JD powers the blockchain. We've won 8 contests around the world. So we've actually won more contests than any company on the planet, which don't know what it accounts for, but it's kind of cool to say.
Sebastian Markowski, I'm a partner at Blockchain Valley Ventures. We are a merchant bank having a digital asset advisor where we advise large corporates. We have an own fund where we invest in late Series A stage. I look at the corporate finance franchise, which at the moment means mostly equity fundraising for blockchain-based business models when they aim to raise 10+ million euros to fund their growth.
Cool. My name is Vahid Toosi, part of a collective called the Ghostbusters. Ghostbusters were quite involved in the launch of EOS. We're also the ones building the Liberland DAG, the decentralized autonomous government. And we might be doing other stuff too.
Might be.
Yeah, might be, yeah.
Hi, my name is Matty Greenspan. I'm the Senior Market Analyst in eToro. My main focus is identifying global macro trends that people want to invest in. I was lucky enough to be analyzing the crypto market since 2013. One of the first ones I put out was the Cyprus bail-in, if some of you remember that, and that basically set off the 2013 bull run. And always looking at interesting investment opportunities.
Cool. Cool. Just myself, been in crypto since 2012. Master Ventures, we've got a couple different verticals, but our goal is to basically help the entire world adopt decentralized technologies, systems, governance models. I mean, I would love to see a world where we have different borderless nations, where different governments are competing for their citizens. If you just think about that for a second, it'll blow your mind. Massive paradigm shift, but I think that we can hopefully do it one day. There's a long path to get there, but that's kind of our goal. In between, we do advisory, investment, and also building projects in-house, focused on self-regulation. Just so you guys know a bit about me, like, this is kind of going to set the tone for this panel, but I believe it's very, very difficult, if not impossible, for regulators to create legislation for borderless projects. I don't know how people expect that to happen, so I think that we need to focus on self-regulating. With that, we'll dive in. The question is, how do we facilitate communication between legacy financial systems and decentralized blockchain-based exchanges? My first question to you, panel, would be, do we even need to facilitate communication between traditional financial systems and decentralized exchanges? Anyone jump in? Do we need to facilitate, like, is there a need to actually try to bridge this gap here or incorporate the two, traditional financial into decentralized exchanges?
Neither exists in a bubble. We have one global economy, and they are both existent, so there will be a relationship between them. In eToro, we see ourselves as a major bridge between the two worlds. eToro is, for those of you who don't know, a global broker who has 2,000 different assets that you can trade on. And we were one of the first to add Bitcoin and Ethereum as CFDs on the platform. And basically, it took a while till we were able to educate our regulators, show them what we do exactly and what crypto is. And I think that that's basically the way forward is just knowledge and understanding, because these things have value. Digital assets are certainly superior to traditional finance. It's just going to take some time to bridge the knowledge gap for regulators before they see the value in it as well.
Okay, so just to be clear too, that the topic is decentralized blockchain-based exchanges, meaning DEXs. However, I think that's very limiting. So like, yeah, we could open it up to any type of crypto-based exchanges. But yeah, so again, I guess the question is, I just thought about this before the panel, and I kind of feel like maybe, I don't know. I would like to know your guys' opinions as well. Like, do we need, like, because part of crypto is being your own bank, right, and disrupting traditional financial systems?
I don't think that's true, though, right? So we've seen what's happened with the SEC judgment on Ether Delta, and same thing with IDEX, right? I know the whole crypto community believes that they can have a fully decentralized exchange with no regulation, but we've seen what happens with the Silk Road, right? So we've played that game before. It's not going to fly. So I feel like for DEXs to survive, they have to be regulated. They have to have KYC, AML. Yes, it's not fully the ethos of the crypto community of being your own bank, but I feel like for us to really be ushered in and be compliant and be at the forefront of technology and being adopted and really go mainstream, we have to play by the rules. We can't expect to have our cake and eat it too.
Silk Road wasn't decentralized. You could shut it down because it was a server that they were able to go shut down one server.
Okay, yes, but I mean that same ethos, right, of kind of the wild, wild west.
Also, if you're running Silk Road, you're a massive drug cartel.
But, you know, official McAfee is a DEX, but if they get McAfee, the thing is pretty much dead.
Okay,
there's still a centralized.
The problem is we're trying to be completely regulated. Is we would hinder innovation. I mean, how would we even launch a DAO if we had to be regulated? Because you need to have a counterparty in something. So that DAOs wouldn't exist if we have to be regulated, right? So because you need to have a limited.
You need without any regulation.
Sorry.
So are you saying we should launch a DEX or exchanges without any regulation? How does that work?
Because I mean, how many countries do we have in the world? We have 200 plus countries, and if for us to be compliant in every single country, it's just impossible. So we might as well break them all, right?
I don't think that's going to survive long term.
Short term, yes. We break shit and then.
No, I tend to disagree a little bit here too. So I think what we have seen is that there is no shortcuts on KYC, on AML. I think if you bring the DEX example, I think this is the end where banks probably, it will take a long time for them to integrate. I think there's a lot that needs to be solved, but there may be other areas where where there is a merging or synergies between the blockchain world and the real financial world, because financial institutions bring a lot of things to the table. At the same time, they will be super careful about not disrupting themselves too fast, but because in the long run, they are going to lose a lot of the margins. So they need to find spots where they can operate and build new businesses without losing too much of their old income, because the boards would never agree to that. So I think it's got to be seen in different dimensions and not just one or the other.
Maybe I read the question wrong. The question when I saw it was legacy financial systems. So to me, that means how are you plugging in traditional banking systems? How are you plugging in the traditional financial system to communicate with the new exchange? It's never going to be a replacement. It's a displacement of an existing process. And if you want traditional funds in and out, if you want traditional legacy, you're going to build communication between the existing infrastructure layer and the exchange layer. It's not, I don't think it's an either or, it's an and.
So what does that look like?
If you look at something as simple as Coinbase, Coinbase has created an integration back to legacy. You can do an instant conversion to fiat. You can move the fiat off to your banking system. They've built an exchange, whether it's decentralized or not, it's a different argument, but they've built a conversion between the world of crypto digital to physical fiat that moves across the old SWIFT Fedwire ACH, but it's the integration into the existing system on a new model that's moving everything forward. It's not a completely disruptive new model that nobody understands.
Guys, I'm pretty disappointed here.
I just read
let's bring it back. Let's bring it back to the topic at hand. Like I allowed a little bit too much leeway in expanding it to centralized exchanges, but let's get back to like why we're all here today, right? Okay, so let's talk about decentralization and assume that we have a more mature market, or we don't even have to assume. How do we get there? But let's assume that we have proper decentralized exchanges that have liquidity, because we're building liquidity solutions, whatever. In this situation, let's go back to the question of can we then, or do we need to communicate traditional systems into these DEXs somehow? And what would that look like?
I think the crux of this conversation is that regulation by nature and by history is something that usually starts out local and then expands global. And for the first time in history, we have assets that are natively global in nature. And regulations have been written much differently throughout the world. And there are some that are embracing this technology much quicker. So for example, in Stuttgart in Germany, they already have a digital assets desk, which is fully regulated and part of the stock exchange there. SIX stock exchange in Switzerland is going to have one probably by the second half of next year. Singapore and Japan already have associations that are specifically dealing with digital assets and are also going to be very likely setting up such exchanges. Unfortunately, some other places, United States, for example, is way behind on this. And I think that China is making huge moves in this space as well. So it's going to be interesting to watch how they all mesh together at the end of the day.
Okay, so here's a question. How does it even happen? You guys, pretty much, like the majority of you, have cited on the fact that we need regulation and work with regulators. But how do you expect local regulators to create legislation for borderless assets and be able to successfully regulate that? I would love to hear your answers, because I don't see how it's possible.
So look at FATF. They've already done it, right? It's not something that a local, really maybe if the United States came online with the token taxonomy, but that's so far. But the FATF has already released their statement. It's within the next year, all crypto exchanges need to comply with traditional AML rules. There's no two ways about that.
But not if it's decentralized.
Well, it's decentralized. People are always going to use the Tor browser and find ways around it or whatever. But I haven't seen a decentralized exchange that really wants to be regulated. That animal hasn't come up yet. When it does, I'm sure that the regulators will have to deal with it when it comes. But right now, they've got their hands full just dealing with what there is.
It's kind of like an oxymoron, I feel like.
You're right.
Like, why would any decentralized project want to be regulated? It makes no sense at all. I mean, the whole purpose of decentralization is to operate outside of regulated bodies. That's why you're decentralized. That means no central authority. That means you can't be shut down. That means no matter if head of project dies, it gets going because you've got community. And so on a decentralized exchange, we assume that the servers are based off of nodes globally distributed. Yeah. So again, this issue of regulation to me starts to become irrelevant when we see where we're going. We have to remember that we're very, very immature in this space still, right? We're 10 years into crypto from Bitcoin's inception. We're 5 years into smart contracts. Like, we haven't given it an opportunity to mature. But we see where this is going. Even with internet, took 20 years before we had AOL, and it was adopted. I think we're going to move a bit quicker here, especially in the next 5 or 10 years. But anyway, let's change a bit, because this is like beating a dead horse. So what do you guys think is the biggest problem with exchanges right now, decentralized or
I would say when it comes to DEXs, the biggest issue is liquidity. There's no volume, right? So that's why I haven't really seen any DEXs. As somebody who's been an investor in DEXs in the past, I haven't really seen anybody who's come through and really solved the issue to a point where it can scale and really fulfill the vision of what people envision as a DEX, right? Because liquidity is a very tough problem to solve on a DEX.
I think the premise of liquidity is the onboarding of consumers, and I think the industry kind of screwed themselves by calling everything a cryptocurrency when in reality most of them are digital penny stocks. So if it had been positioned properly where people could look at it as a new asset class for investing in the onboarding, the onboarding into wallets and into an exchange is still very complicated. Just like in the early days of the stock, it wasn't easy to get onto an E-Trade or Schwab and trade yourself. That onboarding of the consumer is the gap. Even if a consumer wants to, it's still complicated to get into the system, and they need to understand it better. I think the industry's been positioned poorly.
I think also there's a different, I think the DEX is not even that important short term. I think the near future of crypto will be fairly centralized, or of blockchain. This is, I think, what we see when everyone was talking 2 years, 3 years ago, was talking about utopian ideas, how we revolutionize the world. I think everyone has moved very, very strongly towards financial applications. Everyone is investing into financial things. Everyone is thinking around that. I think the key shift is what we're going to see is we're going to shift from, or we are currently shifting from retail investors, which was the bubble we've seen, to the professional investors. It will be not as easy to deceive them in the same way. So in order to do that, we need to get the infrastructure in place around custody, because institutions have trouble moving into the space at the moment, and that needs to be fixed. And then we'll see from there. But I think the DEX is a far-out scenario, and the regulator will have to deal with much more burning issues until then.
I actually agree with you, and we have to realize that, like, New York Stock Exchange their daily volume is bigger than Bitcoin's market cap. So we're still very, very early in. But there's two things to answer your questions. I'm a bit afraid of if we do fractional reserve, if the crypto banks or exchanges starts doing fractional reserves, then we're pretty much screwed. Yeah. Imagine if you are now leveraging your Bitcoin 10 times. There's now 210 million Bitcoins out there, and there's no government to bail you out if shit hits the fan. So if those kind of things start happening, that's not really, for me, an exchange and a bank is completely different things. Right. An exchange is the New York Stock Exchange. A bank is what we 90% call our wallets. Custody. Yeah, a custodian wallet is what we call a bank today. So some issues. And the lack of transparency and the lack of standards within exchanges. Like, how much money do we actually have in an exchange? What is backed? What's not backed? So standards within exchanges, so I can know if I put my money into an exchange, which I shouldn't, but if I do, I want to know how much of this is actually backed by some sort of reserve. So. Transparency, yeah.
Maddie, anything else? We're out of time pretty much, so, but Maddie, anything else to say?
I like that idea. I think that there should be more transparency, especially in this industry, and if the point here is to get off of that fractional reserve, I think that's the way to do it.
Yep, I also agree with that. I think we need more transparency exchanges, but I'm going to just kind of wrap it up with back what I kind of initially said, that I think that the best way for us to move forward, or I should say the only successful way to move forward, in my opinion, is that we create self-regulatory bodies, we set standards in the industry that let consumers and retailers know what are the legitimate exchanges by kind of just creating these best practices and standards for exchanges. It's something that we're working on right now. But anyway, yep, thank you guys all for your opinions. Appreciate it. Thank you all for listening. Cheers.